Matthew Brooks and welcome to Australia's only boxing show, KO. We've got a jam-packed program including highlights of Anel Baratello's latest win, and we also take a look at Aussie boxers on the world scene. But to get the show underway, here's the news hitting the headlines.
Felix Trinidad reinforced his reputation as one of the best fighters in the world with a one-round demolition of Troy Waters. A left hook early in the first spelled the beginning of the end for the Aussie. The IBF welterweight champ then trapped a wounded Waters on the ropes, who collapsed under a volley of punches. The 32-year-old Waters said afterwards that he will retire, while Trinidad will now gain a shot at the WBC super welterweight champ, Terry Norris. On the same card, WBC strawweight champ, Ricardo Lopez did what he does best, knocking out the latest boxer to challenge for his crown, Alex Sanchez. Lopez has held the title for nearly 7 years. WBC featherweight champ Wilfredo Vasquez has kept alive his prospects of fighting Nazim Hamed with another successful defence of his title. Meantime, in an upset, WBA middleweight champ William Joppy has lost his title to Julio Cesar Green. Joppy, who was filling in for WBO champ Lonnie Bradley, scored 2 knockdowns and said he thought he'd done enough to win the fight, but the judges were unanimous in crowning Green the new champ. And finally, Joe Bugner says he's blown away by the PABA's decision to strip him of his heavyweight title. Bugner is now believed to be pursuing a showdown with Colin Wilson, who won the vacant Australian title when he decisioned Vince Serbi last year.
And with Jeff Fennick away, I'm joined by the editor of the World of Boxing, Ray Wheatley. And Ray, Joe Bugner has had an amazing career. It would be good to see him get another shot at the national title.
Oh yeah, I think Joe Bugner's still got plenty left, Mathew. He's up there. He has been up there in the world ratings for quite some time. And at age 47, 48, he's still got a lot left.
Now, I get the feeling that maybe Colin Wilson isn't all that keen to fight him, and you'd understand that with that huge experience edge.
Yeah, I think anyone that's actually based here in Australia would start an outsider against Bugner with all Bugner's background. When you think he's fought guys like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, some of the greatest fighters of all time. And, he's done well against them.
And Ricardo Lopez comes away with another great win. They talk about Roy Jones and Oscar De La Hoya in the pound-for-pound battle, but really he's got to be right up there.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's only a little guy and sometimes they forget him. But when you look at, especially the way he fought the other day, he fought tremendous against Alberto Sanchez. And he's certainly up there, one of the greatest pound-for-pound in the world.
And a sad end there for Troy Waters.
Yeah, Troy, you've been in the world ratings for around 9 years with all the major bodies, and Troy's been a fantastic fighter in his time, and had he had the breaks, I'm sure he would have won a world title.
He just looked like a shot fighter, didn't he?
I think it's just all come to the end. It came out that he was carrying an injury into the fight, and I just feel that it's just come at a bad time to get a fight with someone who's a superstar in Felix Trinidad. Yeah,
and it does set up a great matchup between Trinidad and Norris. What's your pick there?
I'd have to lean towards Trinidad. I think Trinidad's is equal in ability to Roy Jones Jr. I think he's probably the best pound-for-pound in the world.
Well, sadly, as we saw before, the curtain may have finally come down on the career of Troy Waters. But Troy is just one of the many Aussies currently in the world ratings, with fighters like Rausel, Baratello and Taylor vying for a crack at the big time. The future continues to look bright for the locals on the international scene.
Thanks to the PABA, who have only just stripped him, Joe Bugner is rated number 12 in the world by the WBA. At the moment, the World Boxing Association's version of the heavyweight title is the most legit because the Tyson tamer, Evander Holyfield, proudly lays claim to that belt. At this stage, it's hard to see Joe at 47 fighting for a world title, but as we said earlier in the show, perhaps a national crown could soon be his. According to the WBO, Rick Thornberry and Mark Jansen are both in the top 10 in their weight class. Both are Queenslanders, and while Thornberry remains active, the future is a little more uncertain for Jansen. Earlier this year, he came out of retirement and put on one of the fights of the year against Joe Palou.
That left jab should be able to keep Palou well at bay.
He's going to be able to do more than the jab. Here comes Palou. 10-punch combination. That's the uppercut. I can't bowl. There it is again. Every time he throws it, he stops him in his tracks. He's thrown it 5 times in the fight. Instead of 500 times, like he should have thrown it. Back comes Polo. I'd like to get somebody later on to count the punches thrown in this fight.
Well, it's non-stop action so far.
But a broken hand in that contest has seen him sidelined for the past 6 months. Another PABA champ, Darren Obar, is rated number 1 by the WBA at middleweight. However, his hopes of gaining a shot in the immediate future received a setback when William Joppy was beaten last weekend. In January, Obar showed enormous courage to overcome Anthony Andrews.
This fight has been fought at such a pace, and I wonder how long they can keep the speed up here. Super fit fighter, Darren.
In the super welterweight division, Ernie Artango is rated at number 6 by the WBC and number 4 by the IBF. Inactivity has been a major problem for the Queenslander, but he does possess good power.
Artango will take in construction, using it for himself. Come on. 30-second mark here in round number 4. Bob. Oh, he hits a big right hand. Oh, now goes Smith.
At welterweight, Shannon Taylor is rated by both the WBA and WBO. The Bull Bash really needs a strong performance against a named opponent to give his career the push it needs. The WBA also rates the ageless Jeff Malcolm, who with more than 100 fights is one of the most experienced fighters in the world at the moment. At junior welterweight, the IBF rate their former champ Kostya Tszyu at number 4. The Russian lost his title in dramatic fashion to Vince Phillips earlier this year.
Big shot by Tszyu. Uppercut by Phillips. Driving Tszyu back. I think Phillips got the better of that exchange. Big right against Tszyu is wobbly. A chance for Phillips. Tszyu in big trouble. It could end. Vince Phillips is very close to having a title. They've got to stop this. They do. They do. Vince Phillips, a dramatic victory.
Kostya's arch-rival Shannon Taylor also rates a mention in the junior welter ranks. At lightweight, dual Australian champ Justin Russell continues his rise up the world ratings. The IBF consider him number 5 in line for Shane Mosley's title, while the WBO have him at 7. Cliff Martin hasn't fought in more than a year, but that hasn't stopped the IBF labelling him their 7th best boxer at junior lightweight. Jeff Bennick, who is looking after the former Australian champ, doesn't believe he'll fight again. Boosted by his win over November Nashingala, Tony Weeby finds himself number 11 in the WBA's featherweight division. And of course the pocket dynamo, Arnel Baratilio, is a mandatory defence for IBF junior featherweight champ Vuyani Bungu. The talented South African, who's held the title for 3 years, will have his hands full when he faces the heavy-fisted Filipino-born fighter.
And just before we talk about the fighters, Ray, we see there the world governing bodies, the different world governing bodies. You're aligned with the IBF. Do you think they are the best?
Well, a lot of their champions would be, I would say, superior to most of the other bodies. But the WBC got some very good champions. So, I'd say it's a toss-up with the IBF and the WBC.
And Kostya Tszyu, finally now he's back in training after that shock loss. Do you think he still has that hunger?
I certainly hope so. I believe he's back in training. I spoke to him last week, and I just wanted to get his what he's going to do as far as he's going to stay with the IBF or is he going to go after a WBC crown. And he said he was not quite sure. He virtually had to wait till his management returned home from America, and they were going to sort things out then.
And Shannon Taylor, a very gifted fighter. He has that real killer instinct, but I would love to see him in against a named opponent, which will work as a measuring stick for him, just to see where he is in the world ratings.
Yeah, I think Shannon's got the ability to go all the way. I think the bigger name opponent they put him in with, I think you'll see the best of him. And he's probably one of the most exciting fighters here in Australia at the moment.
And of course, Justin Russell, another very, very gifted fighter.
Another fighter that could quite easily win a world title with one of the major bodies.
And the PABA, they've done a lot of good for the Australian fighters. Case in point, Darren Obar, who's rated number 1 by the WBA. William Joppy's just lost, so there's a golden opportunity there for him.
Yeah, Darren's in there as number 1 for the middleweight championship, and I hope he does get a shot because he's a worthy contender.
And we'll be back to take a look at Arnel Baratillo's latest knockout in just a few moments.